Good morning or good afternoon.
Good morning. Okay, so we're trying to see if you will come through on the sound system.
Cool.
Yeah.
Am I like on the big screen right now?
No, not yet.
Oh, that's scary. My hair ain't really all done and everything.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I'm gonna switch it off my face to the PowerPoint anyway.
Okay. You can hear you. Okay, we'll get up the phone.
You can hear me? Okay. Can you like put some on the chat and let me know when to start? Because I can't hear you.
Hello?
Hey.
Hey, okay. Sorry. So, we're getting like a delayed YouTube version, but we're gonna chat you in there. Is it okay? We're gonna like.
Yeah, that's fine. I wanted to record it, but that's fine. Just hit me on the chat. That'll work.
We're gonna invite you. Sorry that you can't record it. We're just gonna do like a regular hangout. So, but maybe. Oh yeah, we won't be able to record it. But we're gonna like ask to chat you through GChat or like Google Hangout, and then if you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna I'll get on my GChat now or my the Hangout. Just can you stay on the phone because I can't hear.
Yeah, I'm on the phone. Do you have? Are you able to like? Oh, okay. I need to Google Chat. I don't know if you can. If it's sending you any kind of stuff through GChat.
I haven't received anything.
I think if you go onto your GChat, like if you open it in your Gmail, sometimes it'll tell you that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I deactivated that a long time ago. Okay, let me go. Now I guess I can make myself discoverable or whatever. Yeah, see, I would be able to still work with the delay. I just didn't know if y'all were looking at me yet. That's the only thing.
Yeah, so we could see you, but there's delay. Okay, so Elisa said that we could go back to the YouTube link.
Okay.
But I think you can't hear us. That's the only thing. So I don't think it'd be possible to do Q&A. You could still do the YouTube thing and then just like present what you have, but you wouldn't be able to hear anything from my side. I think that's the way to that.
Yeah, I'm trying to find I don't know where to find the GChat thing at. That's the only thing. Like, I just don't know where to find the GChat. I don't use that one, but if you could tell me where, then I can.
It's okay. I think in terms of time, can you just go on the live YouTube?
Yeah, I'm still back on it. I'm still on it.
Okay, cool. So you can just start right now, like ish, whenever you're ready, and then sorry, won't be able to.
Okay. But, can you just tell me real quick when to start? Like, am I on the screen right now?
Yeah.
Oh, hi everybody.
Yeah, so it's a little bit delayed, but yeah, you can start.
Okay, cool. All right, thanks, Paulina.
All right, bye.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be able to speak to you all. Sorry I couldn't be there, but I need to be here at work and do some other work. So the presentation I'm doing today is called Police the Police, Melvin Black, Oscar Grant, and Civilian Oversight of the Police in Oakland. And I'm getting right to this. I'm gonna share my slide, and there we go. All right, so this again is called Police the Police, Melvin Black, Oscar Grant, and Civilian Oversight of Oakland and BART Police, 1979 to 2009. So many people are familiar with the story of Oscar Grant. He was a 22-year-old father that was murdered on January 1st, 2009 by a BART police officer, Johannes Meserly. And he shot him at the Fruitvale BART station in Oakland. And a lot of people know about Oscar Grant because there was a film made called Fruitvale Station, which talks about sort of his last day on Earth before he was murdered. And so multiple passengers recorded the shooting of Oscar Grant, and it was published on YouTube. It was in the news, and there was very large protests in the city of Oakland. And so people are familiar with many people who really become hashtags right nowadays being shot. Most recently, Walter Scott, the police officer who murdered Rakia Boyd almost 3 years ago, was recently not charged by a judge or not convicted for her murder. And so it's an ongoing thing. But particularly in the city of Oakland, people are not familiar with the murder of Melvin Black and how it led to calls for civilian oversight. And so I'll briefly talk about Melvin Black, but I'm primarily going to focus on efforts to establish these citizens review boards. And so Melvin Black was murdered in 1979. He was a 15-year-old child who was shot in Oakland by police. He was on a freeway off a highway, and they had a BB gun. He later was back on when the police approached him. He ended up there. Multiple stories of what actually happened. The police told him to show him the gun. That's what he did, and then he was shot. They pointed at him, and then that's why they really did an overkill of this young man. Now, there had been efforts for police oversight in the past, but this was the one that really galvanized the Black allies. And again, this was in 1979. So the research question in this project that I really I focused on was how race and class, spatial relations, and police influence the impact and the strength and the jurisdiction and the composition of civilian oversight of police. And so I'm going to explain some of those different things really briefly. First, though, starting with my thesis is that external and internal political structures, spatial conflict, and police influence, as well as race, impact how these civilian oversight bodies are composed or structured, what they're able to actually do, and how strong they actually are. So as far as like my literature review, I looked at a lot of different things around policing, and one of the first findings relates to policing being very fragmented. And so it's been said there's over 18,000 different jurisdictions of policing just in the United States, right? And in many instances, these are very small, less than 100 police officers. In some places, you have maybe like 6 people who are the law enforcement officers. And in some of these different jurisdictions, we also know that they are racially and economically segregated. And so Ferguson is a prime example of that, where you have a police force where with 53 police have 3 Black folks in a city that's predominantly Black, right? In addition to this segregation that exists, particularly the racial segregation, you have very antagonistic Black and police relationships, right? And so this is very historical. For those of us who trace the history to the slave patrols, we understand policing as a mechanism to continue to keep people in their place. And then finally, there's a lack of civilian oversight of police. And so civilian oversight, it deals with these bodies, or it may be a person such as an auditor, or it may be a commission, which is focused on adjudicating complaints against law enforcement, right? And so that might be, they disrespected me, whether that was verbally or I was attacked, or in the cases of these ongoing police shootings, it's a way of having some form of accountability for police who are involved in these really egregious acts. There's also a lot of research that focuses on cities and how when blacks get political power, they are more likely to adopt civilian oversight. So one study, for example, said that having a black mayor was the key actually, in whether or not a city would adopt civilian oversight of police. And so it's really important to understand that, you know, police have a lot of power over civilians. They're really paramilitary, and they're licensed by the state to kill. They're licensed by the state, and your death, your murder could be labeled a justified homicide. And so despite ongoing police brutality, which folks have seen since, you know, Lil Bobby Hutton, who was the first martyr of the Black Panther Party in the city of Oakland, and this is really just happening across the nation. There's not that much research, particularly on police brutality and the politics of forming the civilian oversight bodies. So to quickly tell you out my method, I'm doing a comparison really of what happened in 2009 after Oscar Grant was murdered, and then what happened back in 1979 with after the murder of Melvin Black. And so I used historical research methods. I looked at a lot of newspaper articles in Oakland Tribune and other black newspapers as well to get various perspectives. I did oral history interviews with different advocates, as well as John Burris, who was the attorney for Oscar Grant's family, but he first came to really prominence when he was the special prosecutor for Alameda County related to the shooting of Melvin Black. And so he did an independent investigation. Also looked at various government documents, and I was a participant observer. So as a journalist, I covered the aftermath of the murder of Oscar Grant. And so that related to court trials, a lot of street protests, as well as different BART meetings where they talked about forming this oversight body. So some quick background on Oakland. You know, I talked more so again on this literature review, how cities are economically and racially segregated. There's all sorts of different police agencies, and this history of an antagonistic black and police relationship. It's important to understand the background of these two different jurisdictions, right, that are dealing with the murder of Oscar Grant, which was BART, and also Melvin Black, who was murdered by Oakland police. So again, these are two distinct police bodies. So the city of Oakland has long been controlled by corporate interests. After World War II, you had a very white, very elite Republican group of people who controlled the city. Redevelopment, all the different boards and commissions, the mayor's office, they ran the city. And of course, we know about the insurgency with the Black Panthers and other groups who attempted to wrestle control from this group. We also know that Oakland is segregated, and historically blacks have been confined to the flatlands. Initially West Oakland, later North Oakland, and eventually East Oakland, right? But there was a clear pattern of real estate interests, whether that's landlords or real estate folks, keeping black people in the flatlands. And additionally, this issue of police brutality has been happening for before my grandparents even got to Oakland. With BART emerged from the suburbanization and the white flight that happened from the city of Oakland, San Francisco, and the suburb. When BART was created by this business group, which is called the Bay Area Council, they created this body which had to represent each of the 9 counties of the Bay Area. Eventually, a few counties, Marin and San Mateo County, opted out of being a part of BART. But there was some issue around forming the police agency because none of the sheriffs wanted to take control of it. And so they created this small force, which is essentially initially like a security guard force. And additionally, this multi-county agency is really controlled by business interests and people who live in the suburbs, because BART was created to get white people from the suburbs to downtown San Francisco and to downtown Oakland after moving from those places. So some of my findings in this study were that there's some common patterns in looking at what happened after the murder of Oscar Grant and what happened after the murder of Melvin Black. So in 1979, after the murder of Melvin Black, Oakland police and the Alameda County DA failed to prosecute the officers that were involved. Oakland police's internal affairs, their internal mechanism for policing police, they didn't do anything. And after Melvin Black was murdered, black residents demanded oversight bodies. They had protests, and by that time there was a black mayor, Lionel Wilson, and they demanded that he create a citizens oversight body. In the murder of Oscar Grant, not only did BART not discipline the officer, the chief of police, when Johannes Messerly was in jail, he was campaigning. Gary G was campaigning for police to put money on Messerly's book. There's a killer cop that was caught on film shooting somebody, didn't, comply with discipline, quit the force, and the chief of police was still trying to get fellow cops to get money for him, right? And on his books, for those not familiar, that's money for you in jail to get little food and stuff. The DA eventually prosecuted Messerly, but that was after mass protests. There were huge protests in Oakland. Some people called them riots, and a lot of different Black elected officials contributed and were called on to contribute in various ways. Additionally, police oppose oversight at every step. So the police officers union in both instances opposed any oversight bodies. They held protests and they pressured political officials by calling them weak on crime. And this happened in both cases. In fact, in Sacramento, where people had to go to get oversight of BART, all of these law enforcement agencies across the state came to Sacramento to oppose any legislation, although it's dealt specifically with BART. And then lastly, the last finding is that the police supporters are predominantly white and wealthy residents, and they oppose police oversight. And this happened both in Oakland, and it's also happened with BART. And so you actually had a pro-police BART director who was actually armed. This guy has a license to have a concealed weapon, and he was one of the main people acting to undermine this effort. And so in my analysis, it's important to understand that segregation is the underlying thing that encourages the hyper-policing of Black people. And when Black people repeatedly demand accountability and oversight within these repressive police institutions, it's white suburbanites and the people that represent them that support this hyper-policing, because they oppose the institution of any civilian oversight mechanisms with any actual teeth. And then finally, police just refuse to be held accountable to civilians, especially those they police. And so in many instances, police do not live in the communities in which they are executing law enforcement or executing Black people. And so their refusal is really a refusal to be put under any control of the people that they're actually supposed to protect and serve. And so this is a long old conclusion. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially there's this ongoing effort to establish civilian oversight. And what happens, and as what happened in this instance, is undermined by law enforcement. So they attempt to make it where they can't discipline the actual officers. And this is what happened in both Oakland as well as at BART after the murder of Oscar Grant. And so this state-sponsored police violence continues. And so it's important to recognize at this time when people are talking about body cameras and training, that oversight is one tool, but ultimately it's impacted by these underlying inequality in cities as well as in regions. And so again, to emphasize, like in the city of Oakland, when they demanded oversight in Oakland, it was the white people who lived in the hills that opposed oversight. It was their council member, right, in the hills, in actually the same district that the current mayor the last two mayors of Oakland came from. They're the ones who oppose oversight, while it's the Black and brown people in the flatlands who are consistently demanding that these police who are shooting us be held accountable. And so quickly for some of my acknowledgments, shout out to the Justice for Oscar Grant movement for supporting me in this research. Rashida Granage of Pueblo, who is consistently advocating for accountability in the city of Oakland. Last night, she was at the city of Oakland with the Coalition for Police Accountability to attempt to civilianize police oversight in Oakland. She'll actually be at the School of Public Policy tomorrow as a part of a debate. The School of Public Policy there at Berkeley is a part of a debate on whether or not the board should be able to fire the police. Dave ID, or Dave Id of Indy Bay, he meticulously documented all these civilian oversight meetings as a journalist, Oakland local, who I did a lot of the reporting for. And in my first GSI, when I came to Cal, this stems from my initial research, my first semester at Cal 4 years ago now. And he was very helpful in that process. If you're interested in reading this paper, I'm still working on it to put it into a journal and also just make it available to the community at large. I Would love to share it with you, get your feedback. I'm always talking about the police, or rather talking about policing on Twitter. So if you're interested in learning about different things, I do share a lot of different information related to law enforcement and people's efforts to prevent the ongoing slaughter of oppressed people. And you can follow me at Rasheed Shabazz. So thank you all very much for your time and your attention. And I guess I can give folks a call back. Y'all can do something on the chat if y'all have any questions. I would like to hear like the Q&A though, and see what other people were talking about. Sorry I couldn't be there with y'all. Peace out. So I'm still here. I just don't want y'all seeing me and everything, picking at my nose.